Hey everybody, and welcome to our spooky episode of O-Tōkushō. I'm your host Alex, joined me by my co-host.
I'm Jack, the spooky Jack this time, though.
You can tell he's spooky because he said he's spooky.
Yeah.
On this episode, we're going over, it's a few things because it's a special episode, and so we're going on a bit of a variety as opposed to a bit as more of a focused on one specific topic.
Yes, we're going to be doing some spooky stuff, but different parts of spooky stuff. Not exactly making a list, right? Not really doing a full-on review or anything. Just spooky topics that might not necessarily be very spooky, actually.
Yeah, we're not doing like horror anime per se. I haven't looked into horror anime at all, and I don't know about Jack, but
not my cup of tea. Generally speaking, it's a bit too edgy, even for me. And oftentimes, for whatever reason, a lot of horror anime has just really bad animation for some reason.
Yeah, they can't really get... I imagine that makes sense. They can't really get picked up by like the big studios or whatever.
Yeah, because it's too gruesome, right? They're not really going to be trying to they're always hand animated, but you know what I mean? Like, lovingly craft somebody getting disemboweled, right?
On that subject, however, I'd like to bring up my sort of topic for this week, which is sort of violence in anime and like what is acceptable and like what is on the cutting room floor. It's an interesting sort of look through. I went through quite a rabbit hole when I was going through this because, as one can imagine, when you look up Japanese and censorship, you're just gonna find a bunch of porn to start off
that's
with.
fair. Yeah, that's fair.
To sort of stay on this topic for a minute. So initially, when I was looking into it, and apparently their way of the way they worded the censorship laws in the beginning, had to do with hair down there. That was like sort of what they based like censoring stuff off of, and then that sort of led to the rise of like that kind of spiraled out of control until they put the kibosh on that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I imagine that's kind of where like sort of the harsher regulations came into play.
So they started with originally regulations on things that were seen as too mature, so they became less mature. But that went wrong in the opposite direction. Oh, that's interesting.
Other than that, there aren't really any, like, there aren't any, like, specific, like, codes or, like a guideline or rules for censoring, like, violence in terms of, like, TV shows and, like, anime and stuff like that. I looked for a bit.
There's no consistency. It just seems kind of up to whatever whims of whoever the producer happened to be at the time.
Exactly. It goes by, like, whomever or whatever entity is producing the content at the time. So which is why you'll get instances like David Productions censoring Jotaro like smoking a cigarette, but at the same time like you'll have him like just impaling Kakyoin with the world, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, hey, you can encourage kids to impale their friends. You can't have them smoking, though.
Can't have that. Like, it seems there's less of an aversion to violence in terms of like what's on printed media. I imagine that's because there's less people to go through when you're, like, doing that. Shonen Jump, I imagine, has not entirely strict guidelines of what you can put into a series, especially considering what their authors put into series sometimes.
I think the gore of animation versus physical media, like, manga and stuff is probably a bit more forgiving as well, because, for the side of manga versus animation, because you don't see as much of it, right? Like, a single panel isn't as visceral as a full-on animation of somebody doing the exact same thing.
There's a famous panel that goes around on Twitter, the lizard guy from, like, Dorohedoro, like, biting a guy's face, and it's, like, way worse in, like, the manga. And then there's also, like, I don't remember what scene it is, but it's, like, Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul, like, realizing he, like, likes eating people.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more, like, blood and, like, that angle when it's really close to the face and the eyes are kind of bugged out. It's
that kind of fisheye.
Yeah, that kind of thing. It seems more dramatic in the manga for it, primarily because they probably weren't allowed to really focus on that in the anime. But I would say it's usually the opposite, actually, with the anime when it comes to a manga adaptation, especially with something like Tokyo Ghoul. Tokyo Ghoul has a lot more blood, like, that you can actually see in the anime than in the manga. but that's primarily because the fights, they seem shorter in the manga. The fights seem shorter. There's not as many chapters dedicated to them, and the story of the interactions between the characters and the world and everything is generally more important. Now, mind you, it's also in black and white, so it's not as obvious, right? Because there's entire sections of the story where Kaneki just basically covered in blood the whole time. Right, and you wouldn't really...
That's also probably another aspect of it. It's like you can get away with
yes, with black blood.
Things.
Yeah, right, because it's the same color as like characters' hair sometimes, right, or like their clothing. So it's like only a little bit darker, so it's stained, but it's not as visceral as seeing something red. But the anime, you get to see all the like damage and injuries being formed in real time. So it just is ultimately more gory and aggressive, especially because there's characters that really don't get any screen time in the manga that are really gory in the anime, like the giant dude in the underground fighting pit just like tearing people apart. He's just a non-character in the manga. There's like a big guy, they warp effect him, basically. They show him being really strong and then kind of just one-shots him. So he's,
of course, yeah.
Right, so you don't really get to interact with him, but in the anime they really kind of drag it out a bit more. On the topic of Tokyo Ghoul, though, for me personally, I've been aware of a bunch of like different horror properties. I never watched the animes for most of them, so when I went to just look at censorship stuff, right, to get on board with something similar to what you're looking for in the episode, I found some stuff related to censorship that apparently Tokyo Ghoul is very much a victim of. They have some of the worst examples of censorship in any anime, and it's not necessarily Japan-specific, because, there's different releases for different countries and stuff, right?
Yeah, sure.
So some places censor them, the way you would expect. There's a little bit of, like, blackness to something, or, like, you can't really quite see, right? And it just kind of covers it up.
Okay.
Other places decided to do something really dumb, that has been done in other series too, and they made the blood white.
The famous cum gore.
Yeah. So they did that in Tokyo Ghoul at points, but there's also parts of it where they just redraw things and cover up the violence by just like, for example, if a character has blood or like really gross things going on in their face, they just cover their faces with bangs, so you can't really see what's going on.
The 4Kids approach.
Yes, but there's also, like, odd choices for some of the censorship. Like, sometimes they censor parts that aren't gory. I am looking at as an example here, Kaneki's best friend when he's dead, right? The first time when he dies, allegedly. Instead of covering the censorship for, like, the blood, they censor his eyes instead. Because I guess they thought they were more disturbing than the open mouth, like, just filled with blood.
Yeah, again, it's like it's a matter of like what I imagine the studios find distasteful.
Yeah, it's just weird preference. But of course, there's also the more well-known and worse, honestly, offender when it comes to censorship with Tokyo Ghoul, and the fact that when there's blood, like excessive amounts of it, they literally just invert the colors.
Okay, that's...
But they do it to such a high degree that it's like, it's not even artistically inverted. It's very clearly changed to make it so you don't see anything. Yeah. Like,
it's not like a JoJo color palette. This is...
they're photo negative suddenly when the guy like gets impaled or something. You're like, okay, that's weird.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. I feel like, from what I've heard of Tokyo Ghoul, this seems like a very odd series to get, like... I want to say, not holier than thou, but like an odd series to get like super sensitive about.
Yeah.
Violence. Because
the premise is the main character is a person that starts eating people because they get rescued by a ghoul that eats people. There's entire chapters and monologues dedicated to learning how to like enjoy cannibalism. But they decided to make the series anyway, and that they're trying to cover up for some of the gore. It just seems like they were asking for trouble, right, when they decided to do an adaptation of it in the first place.
It's almost like an American studio that focuses around kids' content, picking up a series with guns, swords, stabbings, shootings, various amounts of blood and stuff like that, and one of the main characters smokes. I don't know. I feel like just as foolish as that.
Yeah, what show would that be?
I don't know. I mean, I can't put my finger on it.
Nah, I never seen one of those before. It's fine. At least the body horror wasn't as bad when it was animated. It's getting worse in the live action version, but oh god, I don't want to see what Wapol looks like.
Nobody wants to see what Wapol. Honestly, I'm more nervous about what Wapol's gonna look like as opposed to like Chopper. That's not true. That's not true. That's a lie.
No, Chopper is also gonna be. It's gonna be a nightmare trying to do that live action as well.
Another I don't want to keep harping on this. The studio executives are the ones who make the decisions, but at the same time, Hunter x Hunter is a huge topic of getting censored for stuff, because the 2011 anime by Studio Madhouse, it's crazy how much stuff they had they had to either take away or remove or change about it. But at the same time, there's also strange the stuff they kept in too.
Yeah.
For instance, it's too graphic to see Pokel getting chopped up into a meatball after his fucking lobotomy, but they'll still show the lobotomy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you'd think that the meatball would honestly be easier because you could just kind of infer that it's gross, but you're not actively seeing it happen to a person.
Because the panel is just this pork, this pig butcher, just cartoonishly just chopping them up, but we see a pretty extended scene of this dude just with his head open.
Yeah, just getting his brains picked out, yeah.
Or Uvogin will chomp into some dude's skull and spit out a fragment of it into another guy's head. But we cut out a scene or two of I don't know, Kurapika doing something fucked up. I don't know.
Yeah, or Leorio just never being allowed to smoke, even though he does it constantly.
Is it cool that Sanji's allowed to smoke? Because he starts off as 19. That's right. Luffy's 17. Okay, I can see
he's old enough, yeah, and Leorio's just a child, so he can't smoke. Even though he does. And they constantly make fun of him for looking like he's 40.
There's only so many different ways I could say it, but it's really up to the whims of whomever. But I do respect this, the studios that'll just pick up a series and just put everything that's in it. How Madhouse just put the scene of the Nazi eating the baby from Hellsing in. They're just yeah, we can put that in. That's fine.
There's nothing inherently wrong with seeing somebody literally eat a child like a Kit Kat bar. Speaking
of violence and stuff, oh my god, I was reading through Hellsing again because I got the 3 big books because I'm a consumerist pig. I was reading through the 3 big books. Koda Rano is he's definitely a freak. Which I guess that's
of course.
That's what's starting off in making dojins and going to super high caliber violence and action gets for you, but still that man goes crazy.
He does. He's one of those artists that makes his panels mostly ink. There's just so much on the page.
All the Rip Van Winkle stuff is just it's crazy.
Yeah, there's a reason why when Team 4-Star made the abridged series for it, they avoided 90% of all of the interactions with that character. Because it's excessive. It's excessive and uncomfortable. There's nothing else to really interpret it as. It's not a very subtle metaphor. It's not good. Yeah, so going back to the kind of weirdly lazy ways that they do certain things and select stuff, the other thing that I found, right, or the other property I found that has notoriously bad censorship, and to hilarious effect, honestly, is Terraformars. Do you know what that is?
I do not, no.
Okay, so Terraformars is the series that has the giant cockroach people on Mars that give, oddly, fucked up looking Barack Obama vibes is honestly the best way for me to put it. I know that sounds incredibly racist, but their faces are notoriously just kind of weirdly warped human faces, but because of the proportions and the type of hair they gave them and the color of the skin they have for them, they just look like caricatured black people.
I know why you think that, because I don't know if these must have come first. This is way too specific, but there's a meme of, I think the meme is called Obunga.
Oh, yes.
It's basically Obama's face
But
morphed to
into
look like
one
this.
of them. Yeah, okay. No, that's where it would be from. But yeah,
Wait, hold
that
on.
series, though...
wait.
These are real. So all the things I'm sharing with you right now, these are real, and they're in the anime if you watch it. This is not an edit from somebody. This is just what they did. This is how they produced it. So this.
Why don't you describe to the audience what I'm looking at right now?
So the company decided to animate terraformers when they went to do censorship were so lazy. They actually did something even lazier than like the anime like smoke clouds, right? Or the lens flare. They literally have just like black boxes or circles over the gore. That's it. Not like rendered, not blended in. Doesn't even make sense. They didn't add like context stuff to it. It's not even like a goofy cartoon character to cover it up. Literally just the most minimal Photoshop black bars you've ever seen. And it doesn't even cover like small bits of it. It's not even like subtle. There's a censored like a screenshot, right, for one of the scenes where a guy was torn in half, right? So his guts are hanging out. It's gross. You'd understand why it's censored and everything. However, because of how much of the screen it takes up, they literally censor more than half of the entire screen by just making it black. It's actually unwatchable. This is what it originally was, Alex, by the way. So
yeah, I mean that's pretty bad, but like on the other hand,
you don't even know what's happening. The guy could have like tripped in the censored version. He could be like running away or something. You don't realize that he's being held by one of these giant cockroach monsters, right, by an arm after he was torn in half. Like, you have no context for anything because they don't let you see anything.
Yeah, this is absurd. This is like a parody of anime censorship. Honestly.
There's also a bunch of characters in the show that die like dramatic and symbolic deaths, but you can't tell because you don't know who died because they cover up the entire body. You have no idea which character was killed. It blows my mind. Like, this is supposed to be... Okay, so I have an animated version of it, too. So you can just see the whole thing to its effect, right?
Oh, great.
Yeah. So, look. This is what it looked like.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Oh, dude, I love this part of the thing that I can't see.
This looks like dog shit.
It is so bad.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's what airs.
This is like...
You get maybe...
For context,
15% of what's going on.
It's just like
in
big
the
swaths of
entire
the screen
sequence.
just getting blatantly covered up with like black.
Just constantly covered in... It is incredibly bad. Yeah, I know. I don't get it. I understand kind of why they needed to do it, because the series is honestly one of the gorier, like, horror seinen-esque things that they've ever made, but it still just doesn't make sense why they decided that was the idea.
Just don't make the show.
Right? Like, just decide, you know what, maybe this is too much, and we're just not gonna do it. But no, they decided to make it anyway, and it's terrible. But yeah, I had to share that with you. It is honestly probably the worst piece of censorship of any kind I've ever seen.
Yeah, that's absurdity. That's I'm speechless.
Yeah, like, it's so bad that it takes time to process how bad it is. I also have a feeling that because of how poorly the anime did because of this shit, right, that it acts the actual series as a whole as well, because I don't believe Terraformers actually got finished.
Okay.
Like the manga, I don't think it ever got finished. And it went for much longer than the anime did. Obviously, the anime had to stop. Like, they I don't know if they got more than one season. The idea, if they actually fully committed to it, it could have been cool. It would have been incredibly violent and, like, ridiculous to see, but it would have been cool to, like, commit to that level of gore, right, for the sake of the show, but it's just very bad.
Is that all you have in your bit, Jack?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, I think since this is a Halloween, this is a spooky episode, I figured I might as well throw in another little subtopic that I had sort of rattling around the old dome piece for a bit. I've been seeing this sentiment Not like a whole lot, but like I've been seeing it more and more as it's been going on, and that's anime needs to start having filler again.
What?
It's in reference to sort of like series like JJK and like Chainsaw Man and stuff like that, where about like people kind of want like so people have been like asking for filler because they kind of want more sort of like less tense varied interactions with like the main characters. I assume this is in reference to like how the main trios of both Chainsaw Man and JJK don't really get a whole lot of screen time to just sort of like hang out. It's like action, 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 and then spoiler alert,
Yeah, there's no slice of life
for
stuff.
the anime watchers out there, one of them dies.
Yeah, there's not a lot of slice of life stuff that happens in either of those series. And because they're actually basically complete series by the time the anime actually comes out, right? Chainsaw Man's actually complete, right, when the anime started coming out, but Jujutsu Kaisen was getting close towards like the climax of its series when they started animating it, so because of that advantage of time and everything, I suppose, they didn't really need the filler, and because of how filler was received by the fandom, it probably was just like, oh, if we don't need it, why bother put it in, right?
Yeah, I get that. I think it's more just like there's no longer any sort of like leisure or any sort of like fun sort of situations. I bring it up now because maybe like a Halloween episode of like JJK where they're like all going in costume and stuff like that, and we see all the characters planning what they're going to do for Halloween.
Yeah, we don't really have any holiday episodes of any kind for series just in general.
And the beach episode is becoming extinct too.
Yeah, which you can say objectively is a good thing, right? Just because it makes the story more concise, it's also consistently canon, and it's a more direct adaptation of its, source material. But, like, the lack of whimsy certainly can be felt. Especially for shonens in general, right? They're never supposed to really be taken seriously anyway. So you kind of want to have that little bit of goofiness. Because if we're being honest, looking at, like, the big three, right? The original pillars of shonen as a genre and everything, right? Ichigo, Naruto, and Luffy are all goofy as hell. Like, outside of when they're serious and need to kick ass, they're all really goofy people. And that, like, personality and character made them endearing to a lot of their audiences. Also, it also makes them more attainable as, like, a role model as well. They're not perfect, right? If anything, the bar is very low for them as, like, regular people outside of their necessary plot stuff. Like, you can be a comparable, nice person to Naruto, for example. Because outside of, like, making Rasenguns and fighting people, he's kind of dumb. He's not very responsible, and he's also kind of lazy. Like, none of them are, like, exceptional, like, super geniuses, right? You don't have Gojo's as the protagonist for a reason, because there's no relatability to it.
I think My Hero has an interesting going around that. I know they have OVAs every other season for, like, there was one with, like, characters were becoming zombies, quote unquote, because of a quirk, and then they also have their customary, like, first filler episode of every season where they introduce all the characters again.
Like, it's an evolved version of the recap episode.
And, like, besides the part where, like, someone has to explain what all the characters and what their quirks are, like, the situations are pretty, like, fun every time. I know the first one they did was after the sports festival, and, like, they're all, like, going swimming at the pool, and, like, doing contests to see who's better at swimming. I remember there's one where, like, they're going through and like, demonstrating what they learned from their hero internship, and that's fun to see. I think there's definitely good ways of doing it. I just think that you're right. There's not really much point in, like, putting filler in when you could just, like, continue the story as per normal. When fans, especially Western fans now, are, like, more sort of militant about filler than ever because that apparently matters to people. And
I mean, I think we also have a very different interaction and experience with anime in the West, because we are seeing everything kind of in the past as far as that's concerned. So by that I mean, like, So imagine if you're a new person who just got into anime, right? And you started watching Dragon Ball. You have the wonderful, gift of having an entire thing already made, right? And you can just blast through that shit because of streaming, right? There's also American TV shows that release entire seasons in blocks, like just at a time. So the whole waiting week by week thing that we do, right, or that you're supposed to do anyway with anime, just doesn't exist. It just isn't a thing that we do in the West. That's very much like the episodic nature of a lot of anime, right, isn't something we can appreciate here because ultimately anime is just a cartoon, right? It's just Japanese cartoons. And if you were to look at them in the context of a cartoon, that makes more sense, right? Because in America, you'd be like, oh, okay, so I wait for like the next episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog to come out or whatever, and I just rewatch the previous episodes, right? And even with shows that have like context and like overarching stories, like Adventure Time, for example, you don't really care about what they do, right? Before the plot really starts get going, you just wait for each episode to come out, right? Every week. If you were to watch like all of Steven Universe or something, like another long running American cartoon that has a plot to it, right? If you were to watch that all in one block, right, and you never had to wait for anything to come out, you wouldn't even rewatch episodes. You watch the entire series once, and you're done with it. It's over, right? That experience, a lot of anime fans in America, anyway, I think, have had, where they have the luxury of seeing entire series in their entirety and having the ability to skip filler if they want to. And they don't see the necessity of it either because they already have the full thing. They don't know what it's like to wait for the manga to be written so it can then be animated, right? That era has since passed for certain like shows as well, already in anime, which kind of enables the Western audience to feel this way. For example, shonen anime, like the ones we just described with like Jujutsu Kaisen and stuff, right? And the Chainsaw Man. Those series are unique in the fact that it's a modern series, right? That is a shonen, but they don't have to wait for anything. It's just being made. And that's weird. Like, it's supposed to be weird. That used to not be the case. That almost never happened with anything. God forbid it was involving any of the like notoriously slow to update series like Hunter x Hunter or Berserk, right? Like with those fandoms, they're so completely like just whipped by their own, source material that they're willing to get anything whenever it happens, and they never complain about it because they have no idea if it's going to take 3 years for another chapter to come out, or if somebody makes another like animated thing about it.
I heard Togashi I think he said something about making a new chapter soon, or that, like, there was going to be a new Hunter x Hunter coming out very soon.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there's something there.
It's only been a little over a year. It's not that bad.
A crumb of Hunter x Hunter,
yeah,
please.
Like, literally the smallest morsel of anything. We haven't seen Hisoka in 4 years. Please, we need something. But yeah, that type of shift, I suppose, makes more sense, right, when you contextualize it like that. But it would be cool if we had more filler stuff. The Halloween episodes used to always be fun. Seeing characters kind of dress up as other things, just for the goofs of it all. If anything, holiday specials gives me very strong 4Kids vibes, if that makes sense.
Ah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they used to also do crossover specials on like 4Kids and other like networks. Cartoon Network used to do it a little bit. I think Nickelodeon only ever did it a couple times with like their biggest, properties. But like 4Kids was like famous for just adding every property they possibly have to something. Like they did a 4th of July special episode that involved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Optimus Prime, and the Shaman King cast. So like they'll do stuff, right, with all their characters and have them just do goofy things and be silly and have fun. But,
yeah, and this isn't necessarily filler, but there is the part in My Hero where they celebrate Christmas, and it is far and away one of the cutest things I've ever seen in my whole life.
They do have actual Christmas celebration in the manga, but that's a chapter, and... Yeah,
as opposed to like a full-on episode. This is.
Yeah. And most of the time, chapters do not equate episodes.
I think maybe OVAs is probably the best spot where they could do it, but then again, it also kind of it also kind of excludes series like JJK, where, again, spoiler alert,
people just die. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're not gonna get a fucking Christmas OVA with Nobara and Fushiguro and Itadori hanging out because Rutro Raggy,
Yeah.
she doesn't make it much further after this.
No, and technically, well, we're not going to get into it, but needless to say, series like JJK don't exactly lend themselves well to it, even though you think it would, because the series is kind of similar to My Hero in the fact that it's like an organized organization that fights against monsters, right? Like, they're basically in Jujutsu High School, where they even have multiple classes. They have their class, like, 1B fight, effectively, right? Where they see, like, the other branch, right? The other division of their world come to them and they spar with each other and everything. But honestly,
they flip that switch.
Yeah, real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I blame the mangaka entirely for this, but I also don't really blame them. I commend them for being brave and doing something actually different, right?
Yeah, we can't fault them for that.
Even if that different isn't something that people necessarily wanted, it's like, oh wow, you're the first mangaka ever to kill off his entire cast of every character we liked. Fuck you. Like, congratulations, you're the first to do it. Let you be the last, please. But I do believe that the whimsical era is over for a multitude of reasons. The biggest one, though, I think, is something similar to what happened along the terms of something like Seven Deadly Sins, right? Where you can have long-running series nowadays, but none of them ever franchise in quite the same way that, like, Naruto and One Piece have. The staying power, right, of modern shonen is really low. You can have, like, a really hot show that, like, unilaterally gets humongous praise and giant, like, reviews, right, from great, like, notable places saying this is, like, the best show that they ever made and what have you. And after, like, 3 years, when the show ends, that's it. Like, you don't hear anything about them ever again in any, like, meaningful way, which is weird, because there's still the older series, like Naruto and One Piece, that I don't really think it's ever gonna end. Like, even if the series does end, like, their notoriety, right, and reference and like, reboots and, you know, revamping of their story, I don't think it's ever gonna stop. There's a combination of things that lead into that, but I think it's also just a fact of they were at the right point in anime as a industry's history. Modern stuff is made now just to make money. And there's so many choices, right, for them to adapt things that they can just do cash grabs at this point, which is very different to what it used to be, where you only had a couple of outstanding series, and you had to be desperately attached to that, like, series' teat, basically, to milk it for all it's worth.
Like, Demon Slayer's only hanging on just because, like, its anime is so impressive, as per usual. Nobody talks about the manga anymore. It's just...
No, it ended years ago. It's whatever. Yeah. It used to be the new hotness, and it was, like, hype as hell at its peak. And nobody really talks about it anymore. I have a feeling that Attack on Titan's
Dr. Stone, too.
That's true. I think Attack on Titan's going to go the same way as well.
Want to say it won't, but at the same time, like, it's like, what did it really like? I heard from both you and Connor that it didn't end very well.
No.
And its anime is kind of just dragging itself out.
To avoid it, yeah.
Because it knows it's on its last legs.
They have the power of foresight in a way that Game of Thrones did not, basically. They know their ending's going to be really shit and it's unavoidable, so they're doing their best to not have to do it.
They keep throwing logs in front of the train to not run over, like, the people, but they know they're going to have to run over those people.
Yeah, it's going to happen eventually. They're going to have to end the series with, like, the worst allegory of all time. It's just going to be unfun. Nothing cool is going to happen. It doesn't help that the person who wrote the story was probably incredibly depressed and pessimistic.
I feel like the sort of opposite thing is happening with Dr. Stone. I feel like its anime adaptation is actively bringing down any kind of, like, not popularity, I guess popularity is the right word for it. Any popularity it could have had because, like, of how fucking poorly they're putting out, like, episodes. They're just getting around to, like, the second part of the Treasure Island arc.
Oh god, it's being left behind, not necessarily just being, like, killed outright.
Due to, I think it was probably due to the pandemic that they held back the last season, now we're on to like this trend of doing like first and second cores, and like because Spy Family did the same thing. They like held off half of their like next season and like put it into this season. I mean, it's really another reason why I am so against like shows like One Piece becoming seasonal, because I don't want to wait a year and a half to like watch 12 episodes of One Piece. Sorry, that's just not what I want to do. I don't care if the animation is like movie tier every episode. I don't give a shit.
I mean, I myself don't really do the consistent watching for One Piece anymore, but that's because I can't get over the recaps and the next time on, Dragon Ball Z-esque things they do, because the actual episodes are like 15
minutes. You're not much of an anime
minutes.
guy yourself.
I mean, I will be for anime that doesn't do that. Like, I watched, what is it? Of anime that I've recently actually watched, I enjoyed watching their attempt to make Made in Abyss without it being the most heinous shit that you've ever seen. Because I've read the manga for Made in Abyss. It gets really bad. But the anime, though, was pretty nice. It was, of course, as beautiful and horrifying as I expected it to be. I also, what is it? I guess there's just terrible taste in like source material here, but I also watched through most of Goblin Slayer as well.
I haven't seen any like posts or anything about Goblin Slayer, so I'm assuming they haven't done anything like any heinous shit in this new season.
No, the most heinous thing they've done basically was episode 1.
Okay, that really set a tone.
It sets a really totone, because, to be fair, in the manga, it's basically introducing the series with, like, just the goblin's life cycle of reproduction through sexual assault, effectively, and they just show you the whole thing, and it's not good.
Yeah. That first episode writes a check that the rest of the series does not cash at all.
Which is good.
I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, right?
Oh my god, I'm so thankful for it. But at the same time, I am a little pissed that Goblin Slayer convinced me to watch basically just a pretty typical fantasy series.
As opposed to what it actually is, which is one of the most depraved, but also lore-accurate, like, depictions of monsters ever. Like, I actually praised the first episode, unlike everybody else. Not because I like the subject matter, but because I like the fact that they made the monsters in the series monsters, right? They're deplorable. You would never want to fight one of these things, and if you knew they existed, you'd go out of your way to kill them because they're the worst.
Yeah, really just overall bad, and like, yeah, it sets a tone that explains why this character does these things.
Yeah, and I don't want the people listening to this to think, like, my taste in, like, anime and manga is Made in Abyss and Goblin Slayer, because that would be a very, very bad first impression of the things that I enjoy. But those happen to be the two most recent animes I've actually watched.
Oh, speaking of animes that are recent.
Yes. Undead
Unluck, crushing it so far.
Which is good.
I'm loving the anime for it right now. It is chef's kiss.
I'm also personally very excited because they're going to make an adaptation to one of my favorite series. It's going to be Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi, and I'm very happy to see that when it finally comes out.
I just posted the episode that we did for it on Spotify. Quick plug.
I mean, it's a plug for ourselves, but yeah.
Let's see here. What else? I'm trying to fill up more time before we get to wrap. In the continuation of my ever growing single-sided beef with TikTok's Nick Comedy, he made a video saying that like JJK was like both the most popular, like it was like I think he said either the best or the most popular manga like and anime currently. And I just gotta say, no offense, Gigi, but the fucking JJK manga looks like dog shit. I can't imagine like looking at it legitimately and be like, yeah, this is the best manga that's out right now.
I mean, it has the most gripping and hard to predict story out of all the ones that are currently being made. The only thing that would have been as difficult, if not more like exciting to wait for the next thing to come out, would have been Chainsaw Man when it was still running. It now is, right, the sequel to it, but the manga, to its benefit, is very gripping because you have no idea what the hell he's going to do. They've already killed off 2 sets of the strongest characters in their universe, and Jujutsu Kaisen also has the weirdest version of power creep I've ever seen. So the main enemy, right, the final bad guy that we have to deal with is so strong and he keeps getting stronger, that we're running out of people to throw at him. That makes sense. But because of the way the story's been written, ass pulls don't really happen. So it could go anywhere. We have no idea what's actually gonna, put him down. Sukuna's too strong, but he's also in a series where being too strong has, limits, right? The world has a hard magic system. Even though we broke a lot of the rules with the fight recently, right, between Gojo and Sukuna, those broken rules, quote-unquote, still fall within the logic of its own universe, even if it stretches it a little bit more, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens towards the end of the series, right? As to what actually needs to be done to do certain things. And the community, by the way, is going nuts here, primarily because a lot of fan theories that were around are proving to be true, one after the other. X character is not actually dead, or Y character will die because of, X thing. And it's very engaging for the audience to do that. And I also understand the hype train around it and everything, right? Every, major shonen ever always is declared to be the best of its generation whenever it comes out, just because, that's how hype works, especially with these type of battle shonens. But I do see the reason behind thinking that JJK is the best manga currently out right now, but only narratively speaking. I agree with you on the art style. It's kind of take it or leave it, right? In the same way that Demon Slayer is, and also in a similar way to how, I guess, Chainsaw Man and a bit of, what is it, My Hero, honestly, has been for some people. It's a very...
Really?
It's a distinct art style, and being distinct doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing for everybody.
Huh? Because I've been thinking that My Hero's been the best it's been in a long time.
It's the fact that not everything is fully rendered right at all times, because we're getting a bit of a crunch, right, for action and certain things happening in the manga. It's getting to be the climax.
Saying the same thing about Oda's art.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting to the climax of their stories, respectfully, right? And because so much has to happen at once, the amount of time given to each frame or each panel, right, isn't as good as it could be. And I do agree on the One Piece thing. Some of the background characters in some of these chapters have been looking real lumpy. But that's what they have the benefit of the manga or the anime for. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. What they do for it to make it look prettier. I know the One Piece stuff is going to look beautiful, of course, by the time they, animate all of it, but
I have heard rumors that they're going to tone down the animation budget with Egghead.
Damn.
It's just Wano was the special occasion.
Oh, that's disappointing. Well, I say disappointing because there's some stuff on Egghead that would look really cool if they animated the crap out of it.
I will say, I'm this isn't going to happen, but I would love if they made, the sort of look of, Egghead kind of that sort of 80s aesthetic, they had in the volume trailer,
That's fair. I have a feeling it's going to be very Jetsons-esque.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, because everything's so, round and floaty, right? And, the proportions of the people's clothing is so weirdly specific that it does give... And there's also, just antennas coming off of shit at random. So it does definitely give off very familiar vibes to that type of, future aesthetic, right?
I looked at the chapter spoilers, and it seems like it's going to be a big character introduction chapter.
Okay, so we're not going into super long backstory, or do we think we're going to go to super long backstory?
Debatable. We're not out of the backstory yet.
I mean, I'd imagine not, because we basically just started a flashback.
The way you said you liked seeing characters that we know as younger versions of themselves, I think you might like this chapter quite a bit.
Ooh, okay, that'll be cool.
Well, we've dillied and we've dallied long enough, and we've gotten ourselves to a pretty decent time. Any last thoughts on anything we've spoken about, Jack?
Something I do really enjoy distinctly about horror, right, as a medium for manga and genre here, is the fact that it does the one thing that every person who's ever read a shonen really wants them to do. It kills off all of its characters. Horror series consistently kill off people, and it's good because there's not really that much plot armor to work with when it comes to series like this. You just know the main character you're working with is probably going to live, and everybody else is on the table. And that uncertainty makes the series more enjoyable, in my opinion. Don't be afraid to check out horror stuff for anime. Some of it is good, some of it is not. Some of it is not good, but good. If I have any suggestions to make to people for horror stuff to watch for the spooky season, despite the meme that it has become, I honestly think that reading Future Diaries, it's certainly a series, but I unironically love the series. It's very good. There's also, of course, Elfen Lied and Berserk, right, which could definitely be considered horror series as well. But there's something too viscerally gory about Elfen Lied for me to suggest to most people. And Berserk has well and above transcended the horror aspect of its medium. So it's more so just a really interesting story about a character's development, like dealing with trauma, with the context of the most horrifying demonic shit you've ever seen.
Yeah. Speaking of horrifying demonic shit, I also recommend Hellsing.
Yep. Hellsing, regular or ultimate, either or. They are distinctly different, by the way, if anyone's confused.
The Hellsing, the original, takes on a Full Metal Alchemist sort of thing, where it didn't have enough story, so it just went with its own thing with, it did its own story and stuff like that. It's still pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Ultimate, of course, is better. It's ultimate for a reason, but it does have a very different and interesting story.
Yeah, and both of them are really good. Vampires and Nazis and werewolves and leprechauns. I wonder if you had shot one with a gun, they'd spill out Lucky Charms.
You probably would.
Probably would. But yeah, that's my recommendations. Yeah, have a spooky time this year, everyone. I've been Alex.
And still Jack.
And we will catch you next time.
Bye.